Good day, son.
Good day.
I may have to stop and take a water break. Been under the weather, but I don't think I need water as much as the drivers at today's race. Saw them passing out from dehydration. That's not a good sign. All right, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go.
Hello, welcome to our Compound, an American take on Formula One. We just finished watching Qatar 2023. The theme of this episode, here's where the story ends. Although I think there will be many new stories following this race. This was a race where there was a sprint, there was a race, there was a track that probably should not qualify as an F1 track given the tire degradation, forcing them to create this odd rule where you can only use your tires for 18 laps. And then we had drivers sort of fainting, having to see the doctor, the medical team, complaining of dehydration, quitting the race early like Logan Sargent. But there was also some very interesting story threads. Max, 3-time world champion this weekend. George making it very clear he will not play the role of Valtteri Bottas. He is no second. Oscar Piastri at McLaren. He's legit. McLaren is legit. And Will Lewis, in his frustration with the car, with the team, with George, pushing maybe a little too hard. Will he ever win another race? Patrick, son, can I get your take on Qatar 2023?
Yeah, Qatar was a lot of fun, lots of stuff going on. We saw, as you mentioned, Max Verstappen once again win the Drivers' World Championship, this time on a Saturday, which is a little bit weird. Normally happens after a race on Sundays, but thanks to the sprint in Qatar, he actually ended up winning on a Saturday, which, could have proven to be a let-off for Sunday's race, but he did not. Ever the go-getter that he is, just pounded out the laps, won Sunday's race relatively easily, looked after his tires like he needed to. No problems there. McLaren, if, you think about if they just started this season mediocre instead of god-awful, they could be fighting for P2 in the Constructors' Championship right now. Certainly, at the very least, fighting Ferrari for third, rather than squabbling for a measly fourth with that Aston.
Oh yeah, it was weeks ago we said, you know what, McLaren is turning things around. They should surpass Aston. But you're right. I mean, had these changes been implemented, if possible, even just a few races sooner, they could be fighting Ferrari for third.
But theoretically, they still could. I think they're only like 60 points down or something with 5 races left. If they keep going at this pace, it could be tight up there.
Nice.
So we'll see. They'll definitely pass Aston. There's nothing Alonso can do to keep them at bay. But so be it. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton in that Mercedes garage you mentioned, just exciting. Exciting to see what the future holds for that team. Lewis, he's the company man. He says the right things, but when it comes to racing, he goes all out. He wants that win. He wants to be the best. George Russell, I think, it's the same with him. It's very Mercedes, I think, and seemingly very Mercedes to collide with each other on the first lap. So
like Lewis and Nico Rosberg years ago. I mean, but that was great. That's what we fans wanted.
Yes.
Remember when Nico retired, they put Bottas in there. And so basically it was years of mostly ceremonial wins for Lewis. He was almost never challenged. Seb, for example, really tried a couple times, Leclerc, the Ferrari. But over the course of the season, there really wasn't much chance until Max and Red Bull came along. So I love that drama. I don't think George has the talent of Lewis Hamilton. Not many do, but he is a talented young driver, and he's made it clear he will not move aside. He will not hold off. He will not play the number 2. So that's going to be fun because that Mercedes car has gotten better overall as the season has progressed. And I think it'll be even better next year. So that's going to be fun. When they're challenging Red Bull, when they're challenging Max Verstappen and fighting each other, the fans are going to love that. Choose sides already.
Yeah, it'll be good to see. And, it's funny that there's 2 sort of British drivers, I guess, in that team. We've often seen sort of the split nationalities, and we sort of get the Sky broadcast, so sort of the British leaning broadcast. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the support sort of shakes out in the garage among the fandoms, how that sort of all unfolds. But I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch.
It definitely will be. And I don't think Toto's prepared for that. Toto Wolff, the Mercedes, the team principal.
I think that's why he's been gone the last few weeks. He's like,
right.
I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, right. He's sort of watching the team, 1,000 miles away, and he remembers what a powder keg it was when it was Lewis and Nico Rosberg in there, and so this is going to be fun. I can't, next year that Mercedes team, that's going to be great to watch. Let me get your top 5 for Qatar 23, Patrick.
Yeah, my top 5. I think for the most part, pretty straightforward. These guys were great again this weekend. My driver of the day, of the weekend, has to be the young Oscar Piastri. Nice. P1 in the sprint, P2 in Sunday's race. Just really composed, fast. Really hasn't put a foot wrong for most of the season, and certainly this week was the case again. McLaren just keeps improving overall in that vehicle, and it's great to see how well Oscar has done this season. Then I have George Russell. I think he did really well. Sprint was pretty crazy. Got a good start overall. Those soft tires worked really well in the sprint for him, and then just kind of fell off, and he wasn't able to hold on to the lead. Which ultimately was sort of the reason FIA came in and said, "Look, we can't. You basically have to change tires every 18 laps."
Which is just ridiculous. I mean,
it is ridiculous.
That track,
we can get to it.
Yeah, I get that Qatar is spending so much money to support F1, but yeah, that track has got to go. They need to make changes on that.
Yeah, it was frustrating, I guess, to say the least. But then, in Sunday's race, Russell started out. It was from P2, right? Was what he qualified in, and I mean, really through no fault of his own, ended up at the back of the pack after colliding with Lewis. It's tough to say. I think Lewis really should have given George more space, should have backed out of that, knowing that his teammate was there, and making sure to avoid contact with your teammate. But they're racing drivers. They're going to go for it, and it ended up costing Lewis and ultimately George probably a podium. He came back through the field really nicely though, Russell, and
Yeah, he really did. And, and like I said, I don't blame him for that. Lewis was on the softs. I think and I'm sure the team knew his only shot was just a great start, somehow jump in front on those soft tires, get in front of George, get in front of Max, hopefully. I don't think that was going to happen, but you don't know. But, you know, he essentially forced the issue on George. George, you either back off and let me pass or we crash. And to his credit, George is, I'm not backing off. And, I think some people say, hey, Lewis is the senior. He's the world champion. You should do it. That's not how a driver needs to think. Plus, it, Lewis is not fighting for a championship here. The best outcome is he finishes P2, instead of P3. The best outcome for Mercedes is they finish P2 instead of, well, they'll finish P2 regardless.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you're asking George to sort of do something that just goes against the very notion of being an F1 racing driver for essentially no real gain. And good on George for saying, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I think Lewis was in a little bit of a similar situation, but he was the one ultimately that forced the contact. But I think both of them are sort of entitled to feel that they sort of deserve that position, and the other one should be the one to back off, right? So I get it, and it harmed Lewis more than it harmed George. So I guess sort of karma acted quickly, more or less.
Yeah, which is rare because Lewis is just a master at getting the elbows out and taking another driver out, and just no damage. And this time it just didn't quite work. I thought it was worth the risk, but you can't ask George. This is not Abu Dhabi 21 where it's like, look, this race of the championship's on the line. It's not. It's done. It's over.
Yeah. But I mean, George came back to P4. I thought, good race, got through the whole field. It was just the McLarens and Max that really were just too far away for him to really have a shot at coming back. But ultimately, I think great weekend for him. Then I have Max third overall as in my drivers. Really classy drive in the sprint. Kind of backed out at the first turn. Let a few drivers go by, but he was just there to keep the car on the track. Stayed calm, ended up P2 when all was said and done. No problems there. And then relatively easy victory on Sunday in the race. Just looking after his tires as best he could and making sure, the McLaren stayed behind him. He did everything he was supposed to. So once again, great performance from him, super classy, and a third world championship to his name. Then I have Lando Norris, the other McLaren driver, just great overall from him. I think a few years ago we were like, oh, he's just that silly kid in the McLaren. Yeah, he's pretty quick, but I don't know if he's ever, really going to accomplish a lot in F1. He easily should be able to get a number of wins in Formula One if McLaren can kind of keep progressing in the way they have this season. It's sort of bound to happen eventually for him. Really good overall performance this weekend, but lost out to his teammate in both sprint and race. And then lastly, I have Fernando Alonso. I think there's a lot of guys that had good races, and Alonso, had a couple of mishaps throughout the race on Sunday, but I have to say, this guy's over 40 years old. We had drivers passing out, quitting. The dude's over 40 years old and comes P6.
I
Like, give
know.
him some fucking credit.
In a brick of a car. I know. I saw him after the race. I'm like, wait, Oscar's on his back.
Yeah.
Logan's sitting the medical team. I think Charles is being looked after. Max just looked wiped out. Lando looked wiped out. And Alonso's around there, shaking hands like a politician. I was like, how the hell is he doing this? This man is, what sort of black magic is he working out here? So, okay, so your top five: Oscar, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and Fernando Alonso. I do not agree. I do not disagree with any of that. Best surprise of this race, Patrick?
Um, Best surprise, there's a few good ones, I think. Ultimately, I think the Alfa Romeos,
Wow.
good points in this race. Kind of surprising to see how well they did. Um, good work against Perez and his Red Bull, Lance Stroll in the Aston, and even fighting the Alpine of Ocon. They ended up leapfrogging Haas first, I think, eighth, seventh or eighth in the Constructors' Championship. So, I mean,
Yeah,
really good weekend for them.
yeah. I mean, credit to Bottas and Zhou. I mean, to me, those guys are like they're like engineers at Yahoo. They could get jobs elsewhere. It's like, why not just go work for Google, for crying out loud, or Amazon, Microsoft, Apple? No, they go in every day at Yahoo and they're putting in the work. They're actually, they put in the work. It's like, it's Yahoo. Why? What are you doing? But it's like, no, they're doing the work. So, and look, it's paying off. So, props to them. Uh, that's a good one, actually. So I guess my best surprise would be McLaren. I mean, I think with this podium, I think if my math is right, and it usually is not, but if it is, they've had 7 podiums this year. Mercedes, where they get their engine from, only 6.
Huh.
I know. Now, I mean, I think Mercedes is sandbagging a little bit. I think what we saw today was more pride on Lewis's part, and that's why he, kind of forced an issue. I think Mercedes is sandbagging a bit. They know they've got second. They know there's no hope for first, and they're just working furiously on next year's car. So I think McLaren has developed more and better and faster this year than Mercedes. But nonetheless, Oscar, like you said, he won the sprint, came in P2. Lando came in P3. McLaren, that's their 7th podium, I believe. They're moving up. As you said, they started working. Had these improvements been a little early in the season, they'd be, fighting with Ferrari. And we did not expect that. We knew they'd surpass Aston, but not, yeah. So next year, this is going to be fun. They've got, I think, the best team, Oscar and Lando, a good car, a good team. That's going to be fun. Your biggest disappointment, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think, a fair number of sort of annoying or disappointing things from this weekend. I think the track resurfacing, leading to sort of weird tire wear and ultimately some strange sort of rules that were put in place to protect against the tires was sort of frustrating and disappointing to see. There's a lot of work that goes in to the strategies and things like that for all of these teams, and to kind of take that out of the equation because the track is, I don't know, just like not working very well.
Yeah, not
It
F1 ready.
is kind of crappy. I think there needs to be some regulation for these tracks, and when their resurfacing projects needs to be done, and making sure Pirelli can get the kind of data that they need so that they can allocate appropriate tires and things like that. So I'm hoping that, another, new track going down this year in Las Vegas, we don't see the same kinds of issues there. I guess the other quick disappointment that I have is like the lack of maybe driver safety precautions that were taken this weekend. I mean, I have never seen a race where somebody needed to retire because they were about to pass out while driving the car. That's not acceptable. So I think there needs to be something looked at in this race and precautions taken in the future for things like that.
And that was Logan Sargent. He's the rookie. So he's never been in a situation like this. So he wasn't as well prepared as he should have been. But as you said, Fernando Alonso aside, I mean, we had multiple drivers being looked at for fairly severe dehydration. I guess for me, Logan's another one. I mean, James Voles, who oversees the Williams team, has said he wants Logan to be back. Well, I want to win the lottery, but I don't think these things are going to happen. I think you need more than a year in F1, but you just may not get it. And I don't think Logan is going to get it. He had to retire due to illness. He crashed out in the sprint. It's just been a poor year. So that was a disappointment. Seeing Carlos Sainz not being able to race, that was a disappointment. The biggest one for me, though, was Sergio Perez. I've defended him all season. He's in the best car. He should finish second. I still think he will, but it's in doubt. Lewis might take second. And Lewis is a better racer than Sergio Perez, but not that car is not the equal of the Red Bull car. This race, Lewis crashes out on lap 1. Sergio gets 1 point. He's in the best car. He comes in 10th. This is, like I said, I've defended him. It's like, look, he's the only one who survived in that Red Bull paddock with Max for years. Ricciardo got chased out. Ocon, Viet, Albon. But I think the time is nearing. Anyone on the virtual podium or anything for you, Patrick?
Yeah, I saw this this neat video that the Mercedes F1 social media team put out about it was on like Thursday or Friday. Is actually about how they look at and understand the new track, surface that was put down in Qatar. So they sort of went through the process of, first we do like a visual inspection, and then we send, these super high res images of the track surface to our R&D headquarters in the UK, and get our experts, our engineers to look at those and kind of understand what's there, and then naturally they gather as much data as they can in the practice sessions on all the different tire compounds, push laps, long stints, things like that, to really understand what the sort of tire dynamics are on this type of surface. And I don't know, I thought it was a really interesting video. So I guess on my virtual podium, I have the Mercedes AMG F1 social media and technical teams.
Awesome. Yeah, the Mercedes social media team does a good job. So that's a good one. For me, it was the radio messages. Sometimes they're good, sometimes not. This week, I thought they were particularly good. There's the one, I think there was one for Alonso, something like, "Hey, my ass is on fire," which that one made me laugh. There was one, and I thought this was so Ferrari, so Charles Leclerc, and it was like, his engineer came on the radio and said, we're going to have you pit next lap. And he's like, wait, pit? And he's like, no, next lap. And Charles was basically like, don't get on the effing radio to tell me not to pit. You're basically telling me to pit next lap. So next lap, tell me to pit then, So I thought that was funny. And then Lando got a little testy because, McLaren came on the radio and said, hey, let's stick to the strategy. And he's like, what the hell? I think I can pass Oscar, but the strategy meant Oscar comes in ahead of him. And so it was all good. It was all good. All right. Switching to the soft compound. Lance Stroll, Patrick, son of Aston Martin owner Lawrence Stroll. Lance is an F1 driver. You might not know that.
He's been pretty invisible this season, honestly.
With Fernando Alonso, and you're right, he's been invisible until this weekend. With the infamous Stroll poke, sort of like I think he just got a little angry at how bad he was doing, and it looked like the cameras sort of showed him maybe poking or pushing somebody in the Aston Martin garage. Social media sort of went crazy. And there's sort of two factions. The 99% faction, which was sort of like, look, F1 is now a big corporation, a big American corporation. We do everything by the rules. We've got a big HR team. You can't go touching anyone. You can't go saying anything bad. So Lance needs to be punished, maybe even punished to the point where he's fired. Then you have the 1% like me. It's like, hey, man, these guys are putting their lives on the line. This is a high intense sport. These are men, at peak condition, in peak cars, going faster than anyone ever should. Things don't work out. You're going to get pissed. Might hit somebody. I'm okay with that, but I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't really care. I'm good with you pushing or hitting or whatever. Like, it doesn't bother me. I think it's weird to get super uppity about it. I think, if you want to set an example or whatever, then I don't know, fine him or suspend him for a couple of races, but I don't really think that's going to matter too much to him. So
yeah, and I'm not sort of even suggesting that pushing, shoving, touching, yelling should be, promoted or enabled. Maybe he should be fined or something. But it's just sort of, in these high stakes sports, it's sort of, if you're going to do something that sort of breaks the rules, it better have mattered. Just sort of being crap, that doesn't give you the right to then, hit somebody or, take your frustrations out on another person. It's like, hey man, you got to step it up. I mean, poor Lance Stroll probably thought he was going to mind meld with Fernando Alonso, suddenly get good. That did not happen. All right, next. Who do we think is going to challenge Red Bull Max next year? Is it going to be Lewis, George, Mercedes, Max? Not Max, but will be Lando, Oscar, McLaren? What do you think?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say absolutely nobody. I mean, Red Bull could get caught up and, not have clearly the best car next year. And then I think Mercedes is probably the more likely team to be close enough to challenge Max. So I guess, the most likely option is probably Lewis Hamilton and then George Russell, I would say.
Not Carlos and Charles and Ferrari?
I don't believe in Ferrari as much as I believe in Mercedes to challenge throughout an entire season, I guess I should say. I think Ferrari typically has a pretty good car in the first half of the year. Then they kind of lose touch a little bit. At least that's what it has seemed like when they've produced their challenges over the last, decade or so against the dominant teams. And we saw Seb challenging and Leclerc challenging Mercedes and Hamilton. It was really only for the first half of the season that happened. Last year, when Red Bull had that horrible start to the season with 3 or 4 DNFs in the first couple of races, and Leclerc just got off to a flying start. By the second half of the season, it was very clear that Ferrari could not hang with Red Bull. So, I would believe in Mercedes more to have a full season challenge against Red Bull than I do Ferrari.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think McLaren, will also be better than Ferrari next year. Ferrari's just become, too unreliable across the board. So, and like you said, I think Max and Red Bull, Max is like the Michael Jordan of F1. He's just relentless. Red Bull, I think, will have the best car or second best to Mercedes. And, Max in the second best car, I still think that's a win. But we'll see. I think it will be more competitive than maybe you do. Now let's talk money. Let's take this to 11, Patrick. These go to 11. Team Andretti was approved. Their bid to bring a new team to F1 was approved by FIA, which has influence but is not F1. People need to look into the difference here. The F1 is owned by Liberty Media. Then you have this sort of complex, convoluted ownership structure. You have the different teams, the 10 teams with different owners. And it's the teams, especially the team principals, who are saying, we don't want an 11th team. Because sometimes they say, oh, there's that's too many cars on the grid. I think that's a bogus statement. The real thing is the money. There's 11th team means you may wind up with a little bit less prize money. And more importantly, you're sort of sharing the value now. And if the value doesn't grow disproportionate to what the new team is taking, you've lost. I think that's a long-term bad bet. I'm with Liberty Media. I'm with the American corporate view, which is you just grow, keep growing. That's what your focus is. You just grow. Adding 11th team that's willing to put a few $100 million into the sport as an entry fee, bringing new sponsors, 2 new drivers, a new paddock. I think that's all good. What do you think?
I'm with you. I think adding an 11th team ultimately in the long run will probably grow the sport so much so that all the teams end up making more money on the whole. I see realistically no long-term downside to adding an 11th team for Formula One. I think, in the short term, particularly teams that may be looking to sell, they might not be as enthusiastic about that. So, we've talked a lot about, Red Bull potentially selling the AlphaTauri team, or, I've seen some things where Lawrence Stroll maybe is thinking about selling the Aston Martin team to a Saudi fund. I don't know if any of that is true or not, but, I can understand why you would want to keep the 10 teams, while you're looking into business dealings. But no, I think on the whole, adding an 11th team would be beneficial to everybody, and I think would make the sport all that much more fun. And I think having the Andretti name in Formula One again would be like, I don't know, it'd be really cool. So
That would. Yeah, I know. I agree. And, and it's not just Team Andretti. the primary sponsor, I believe, is Cadillac.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got Ford associated with Red Bull, Cadillac associated with Andretti. That'd be two American engine manufacturers sort of now involved in F1, which I think also would be great. All right, let's keep on the topic of money. Apple CEO Tim Cook channeling his inner Rupert Murdoch. Rumors are Apple wants to buy global streaming rights for Formula One. And I mentioned Rupert Murdoch because, he was sort of the media genius who realized, this is a tough business. Where are you going to make your money on? And you need certain platforms. And it was essentially local news, weather, sports. And I think Apple is trying to build up their Apple Plus platform, lock in all their users on iPhones and iPads. And I think this makes sense. The rumor is it would be, I think, $2 billion a year for global streaming rights for many, many years, which is a steal. I mean, the NBA, I think, is looking at close to $10 billion a year in global broadcast rights. So what do you think of that one, of Apple and making a play for global F1 streaming rights?
Yeah, I think Apple is. I mean, it's a smart move for Apple. I think the sport is continuing to grow, and you can see the sport gaining popularity in places like the U.S. And I think that only continues, and that makes it all that much more of a good idea. In the last year or two, Apple basically bought the streaming rights for MLS in the United States and Canada, I guess. And that's, a sport, soccer, that's growing in popularity in the States. And I think, they're making a similar play here for Formula One, just sort of buying low, basically, and expecting the sport to grow.
And Canada, I guess. That's actually the official close of every G7 summit, Patrick.
Yeah.
And Canada, I guess. All right, last one. Still talking money. The next race is in Austin. I think it's in a couple weeks. You might be going to that race. A site called Finance Buzz sent us some info. And they looked at what the cost of attending an F1 event was. And it's not cheap.
It's not.
The overall average cost of an F1 weekend, they said, is $4,700. If you try to be budget conscious, it's $2,000. If you want to go to Monaco, you're going to drop at least $25,000. And that's not living well. That's just, having a good time at the Monaco Grand Prix. Best option is the Mexico Grand Prix. You'll drop maybe $2,000. That's for the full weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, getting yourself a hotel, going out, getting a couple race tickets, that sort of thing. But still, I mean, this is why, people say, oh, I want to get rid of the sprints. Look, people are paying a lot of money to attend these races. They want to see something on Friday. So on Fridays, you'll get some practice and maybe you'll get qualifying. Saturday, sprint shootout. Sunday, the race. I mean, you got to make it worthwhile. This is a lot of money. So you got to bring value. So those numbers are higher than I expected, but I think F1 is doing what it can to, really put on a show. It's a traveling circus, and they want to make sure they put on a show every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, those numbers don't reflect just the event itself, right? It's the travel, the time that you're residing in that location, those kinds of things, and that can be really challenging financially, especially if you don't know somebody that lives in the area. Thankfully, I do. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money to have to drop to just go to one of these events, and you definitely want to have a good experience there and to see something fun and exciting. And so I think people got upset, at how sort of Americanized certain things have become, especially, if we look back at the Miami Grand Prix earlier this year, there was a lot of outrage, to say the least, about some of the more gimmicky things that happened. But I think that keeps fans entertained, right? There's more things to do, more things to see. And, obviously you're there for the racing, for the cars, all that. But, you got to make sure that the whole experience is something that people will appreciate and remember.
Across the line, that's our segment where we predict the top 5 at the next race. The next race is in Austin in 2 weeks. There's also a sprint there. Now, in Across the Line, we make our predictions who will finish in the top 5. If we get that correct, that's 1 point each driver. If we get them in the exact same spot, is it 3 points or 2 points?
3.
Darn it, I was so close to getting across the line. I never get it right. And once we select a driver, he is off the board. The other person can't take him. Patrick, what are the standings for Across the Line?
Well, both of us had pretty decent weeks this week. So after the Qatar Grand Prix, you are leading Across the Line 61 points to my 58.
Ooh, and how many races are left? Is it 5, 6?
I think.
Okay. Wow.
Right?
Okay, so this is anyone. This is open. This is not like the actual F1. Okay,
still wide open, yeah.
Yeah, so who goes first?
You have first pick.
Ooh, it's Austin. Let's see. I don't think Max can be as driven and relentless now that he's got it sewn up. I still think he's a shark, but he's a full shark. He's not a hungry shark. And Sergio, his livelihood is on the line. So I'm going to go with Sergio wins with massive amounts of Sergio fans in attendance. Sergio wins in Austin.
Nice. I don't know. I'll take the full shark. I got my money on the full shark instead of the piranha.
Funny.
Yeah, I'll take Max, I guess, P1. Look, I think he's going to be upset with himself after this week. I'll take, one of the other world champions on the grid. I'll take Lewis, P2.
Oh, nice. I think good things are going to continue for McLaren, and I'm just going to swap. Number 2, Lando. Number 3, Oscar.
Dang, another double podium. Damn, I mean, if that happens, look out, Ferrari.
I know.
McLaren's coming for you.
Yep. And like I said, we knew they were going to take over Aston. We were like, look, Alonso in that car is not going to hold them off forever. He held them off much longer than we thought. But now, yeah, look out, Ferrari.
Yep. Let's see. I guess I'll go same. I think George is going to be pissed too that he didn't get on the podium. I think he's going to find a way onto the podium next week.
Nice.
Or 2 weeks from now. And then P4. Maybe Ferrari sneaks in there. Didn't get to race today. Say Carlos Sainz P4.
Okay. Well, I'm going to deny you the other world champion on the grid. So I'm going in 4th, Alonso. And 5th, you talked up Alfa Romeo today. Let's take Bottas. 5th.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Valterri.
Yeah.
Nice. Man, that's tough. I guess the one driver, he's been a little quiet, but had a pretty decent race today, I guess. Take Charles Leclerc, P5.
Okay. So, Austin, 2 weeks from now. This is for the race, not the sprint. I've got Sergio, Lando, Oscar, Fernando, and Valtteri. You have Max, Lewis, George, Carlos, and Charles. Should be a good race. Any crazy prediction for that race, Patrick, and or the remainder of the season?
I don't know if I have one for the race or the remainder of the season. I do have a crazy prediction, though, that I think is very crazy. I'm going to say Liam Lawson will win a Sunday feature race in Formula One before Oscar Piastri does.
Ooh, I think that is not going to happen.
I think if he's already guaranteed a Red Bull seat, he's got a legit shot. He's got a legit shot. Not next year, but I don't know. It's possible.
Okay, well, so then, all right, so then here's my crazy prediction then. Sergio Perez does not race in F1 next year. No, we're going to go batshit. We're going to go take this to 11 again. Sergio Perez does not race in F1 next year. Daniel Ricciardo does not race in F1 next year. Is all the nice things Christian Horner and the Red Bull team and their sister AlphaTauri team have said about Sergio and Daniel, Sergio is just faltering now. He's flailing, he's drowning. It'd be best for him, best for the team, best for everyone if he's out. They said he'll be back next year. I think that won't happen. Daniel Ricciardo, Australia's most beloved athlete, no longer. It's Oscar. And I think the writing is on the wall. I think Daniel's seeing, look, young Oscar doing a great job at McLaren where he got booted. He's been out several weeks now with a hand injury. Liam Lawson's taking his place there at AlphaTauri. Liam's doing, I think, a better job. And I think both of them are going to say they're leaving Formula One at the end of this year.
Pretty crazy.
I want to remind our listeners, send your questions or comments to heartcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show. We definitely will read them. And thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. And we are Lights Out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.